Well, he is risen. He is risen indeed. This was the standard greeting of the early Christians. Because what the early Christians realized is that Easter, the day that Jesus rose from death, is the most important event of the faith. The resurrection of Jesus Christ is the central focus of the Christian faith. Without the event of Easter, there would be no Christian faith. There would be no point in it. If Jesus didn't rise from death, his followers would have just returned to their homes, disappointed, disillusioned, and probably even frightened for their very own lives. They probably would have never spoken about Jesus again. Imagine how you would have felt if you had followed him for 3 years, believing that he was someone important, someone who was going to become the leader of their people. And then one day, the most important day in the lives of the Jewish people, during the time of Passover, your leader is arrested, tried, and executed. All that you were expecting to happen, all of your hopes and all of your dreams dashed to bits as you watched in horror as your leader died, and you are not certain if you won't be next. Peter denied that he even knew Jesus after Jesus was arrested. I don't think Peter or any of the others were about to go around talking about Jesus after he was executed. If they did, there was a very good chance that they would have suffered the same fate. But the thing is, Jesus rose from death on the third day. His disciples seen him. They spoke to him and ate with him. They knew beyond all doubt that Jesus was dead. But now, they also knew that he was alive. The followers of Jesus had a very different week than they had previously anticipated. A week that completely changed their lives. An event that they would share with the entire world that would continue beyond their own time. An event that we are still talking about today. That still has the same ability to completely change people's lives. Oh, what a week it has been. That's the title of today's message. Because if we look at the events in this life, in this time of Jesus' ministry, the events that happened last Sunday compared to the events that went on through the week and happened this Sunday were entirely different. This week went from good to bad to fantastic. All in a very short period of time. All in 1 week's time. Now I believe that most of us can predict how our days will go. For most of us, our days and our weeks usually go pretty much as we expect them to go, with very little deviation from the norm. Today, most of us probably have plans to get together with family and friends to celebrate Easter. And we have a pretty good idea of who we're going to see, where we're going to be, and the times that all this is going to be taking place. Now, there may be one or two things that happen unexpectedly, but nothing major or out of the norm. We can probably pretty much, be reassured that we're going to return to our homes tonight pretty much as we left them this morning. We can usually predict how our week will go, and when we gather again together next week, we probably won't have too much change in our lives or any events that we expect would take place throughout our week. Pretty much, from one week to the next, things happen and things, but nothing too dramatic usually happens in a week. But every now and then, something may happen that takes us completely by surprise and shakes up our lives. Most of the time, these days begin as any other day, but then all of a sudden, something happens. Now, most of us who are old enough to remember the 9/11 attacks, remember that that day began as normal. But then the news broke about what happened in New York, what happened in Washington, and what happened just a few miles in western Pennsylvania from here. And everything changed. Everything in the lives of the people in our country at that point changed. Because all the airports in the entire country were closed for the rest of the week. Those who were traveling were stranded in airports and had to find alternate means of transportation. There were those who went to work that day, expecting just a simple, normal day, who never returned home. So we understand how quickly things can change at times. I heard a story told by a young man of how his life was affected by the Oklahoma City bombing that occurred on April 19th, 1995. He talked about how he was 7 years old, going on a school field trip to the city where the bombing had occurred. He says that they were on the bus on their way when all of a sudden they felt the ground shake like they've never felt it shake before. They were told that the bus had to stop and turn around, that something had happened in the city. Their field trip was canceled. Their day was not going to continue as planned. But for this young man, his mother had worked in the building directly adjacent to the one that the truck bomb was parked in front of. Now, they didn't hear from his mother and didn't know if she was all right or what had happened to her. Especially being that it took place so close to where this bomb went off. A few hours later, she was found by rescue workers pinned under a filing cabinet. She was unconscious. She had glass shattered in her face, and she was taken to the hospital where she remained unconscious. And this young man told of how they didn't know at the time if his mother was ever going to wake up. But he said eventually she did. And he told how this event changed their entire life and how his relationship with his mother became closer than it was before, and how he would never take for granted that his mother would always be there. He realized from this event how precious life is, how quickly things in our lives can change. He understood this more than anyone. The followers of Jesus understood how quickly things can change and how things don't always go as we would predict that they would go. Now imagine the report that Jesus' followers would have given to those they returned to who didn't accompany them to Jerusalem. Now, going to Jerusalem for the Passover, this was a big deal. This was a big event. This was something that the whole family would have been involved in. But maybe the followers of Jesus had some family left in Galilee that didn't make the trip this year. And imagine if, say, Peter's wife didn't make the trip. And Peter goes home after all of this. And his wife asks him, "Well, Peter, how was your trip to Jerusalem?" He may have told it something like this. "Well, you know when you travel with Jesus, you never know what may happen next. This trip started off pretty normal. When we came to the different villages along the way, people would bring their sick and their afflicted, and Jesus would heal them. You know, that's what he did. We kind of got used to that. He healed this blind guy in Jericho and simply amazed the people wherever we went. And when we were entering the city, Jesus decided to ride into Jerusalem on a donkey." Like I said, when you travel with Jesus, you just never know what to expect. And as Jesus is riding in on this donkey, the people were cheering and they're laying palm branches in the streets in front of Jesus, shouting Hosanna as he rode by. Then, as the week went on, Jesus went and taught in the temple for a couple of days. And every now and again, he would get into it with the Pharisees or the Sadducees and here and there. That's the kind of things that would happen as we traveled along. And then we had this upper room where we had the meal. And you know what? I don't know what was going on, but Judas was kind of acting weird the whole time. I don't know what was going on with him. Jesus said a few things at the meal, and they were a little hard to understand, but this is how it is with Jesus. He talks, and sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't, but, we just kind of go along with it. And then he washes our feet. Of all things, Jesus decides to wash his feet. Now, I don't know what that was all about. Now, I didn't want him to wash mine, but then he said that if I wouldn't allow him to wash my feet, that I couldn't have any part of him, so I let him wash my feet. He told us about a new covenant during the meal as he broke the bread and passed it around, and he did the same thing with the cup after the meal. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But then after the meal, we took this walk out to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we're all kind of tired, and we wanted to sleep, but Jesus kept insisting. Jesus keeps insisting that we stay awake and pray. We wanted to, but it was a long day, and it was hard to stay awake. But then things got really weird. Armed guards came and arrested Jesus. Now, I drew out my sword and I cut one of this guy's ears off, but Jesus picks it up and puts it back on the guy. And it's like I never cut him off. I don't know what that was all about. The guards grabbed Jesus, and it seemed as though he almost let them take him away. I don't know, but by this time, me and the others we're running for our lives. We don't know what was going on. Then John took me in, and we went to the house of the high priest where they took Jesus. And people kept asking me if I knew him. It was getting really annoying, but I don't know. I don't know what was going on at this point, Al. I was scared, and I just kept denying that I knew him. These little girls kept asking me. No, and I'm like, just leave me alone. I don't know the guy. Looking back, this probably wasn't one of my proudest moments. And then they take Jesus to Pilate, the Roman governor in Jerusalem, and the crowds appear, and instead of shouting Hosanna as they were before, now they kept shouting crucify him. And the guys and me, we're standing back, we're like, what's going on here? Now, it seemed that Pilate wanted to let him go, but the crowds were very persistent, and Pilate gave in to what they wanted. So they beat Jesus pretty bad, and then they made him carry this cross. And they crucified him. And he died, and they buried him. Oh, but don't worry. He's all right. He's all right. Now, imagine Peter's wife at this point going, What, Peter? He died, but he's all right. Because, like most of them, Peter's wife and Peter and the crowd, their common experience is that when somebody's dead, they usually stay that way. They're not all right afterwards. But Peter says, don't worry. This may sound strange, but I was there. I saw the whole thing, and it still sounds strange as I tell it. And we're getting ready to pack up and come home, and we're waiting for the right moment so we could sneak out of town kind of undetected. But then some of the women in our group got up early Sunday morning to go to the tomb to anoint the body. And there was these two guys there. Because, see, they went to the tomb because these two guys, took him down from the cross and put him in the tomb. But the women thought that, these guys were probably in a hurry and didn't do such a good job, so they wanted to make sure that it was done right. So they thought, before we leave town, we'll go and we'll take care of this. But when they got there, the stones rolled away, the body's gone, and there's these two guys there that told the women that Jesus wasn't there, that he'd risen. They asked him, why are you looking for the living among the dead. Now this was a strange question. The women didn't think that the women even think that these guys were angels. And then the women came and they told us, and it all sounded like nonsense to us. We're like, what are you girls talking about? But I was curious. So I ran to the tomb, and you know what? It was just like the women said it was. Now the rest of the day is kind of a blur, but we decided to wait around and see what was going on. And then these two guys who left earlier in the day to go home to Emmaus, they came back and they told us, now get this, they told us that they had met Jesus on the road, that he walked with them, but for some reason, they didn't recognize him at first. Well, probably because they thought he was dead. Then they invited him in to stay and eat with them, and when he broke the bread, they realized who he was. They told us how he told them about how the Christ must suffer and die, but how he would be raised again to life. They told us how he pointed out how this was all written in the Scriptures. Then as they were telling us all this, Jesus appears right in the room with us. He shows us his wounds and he asks us for something to eat. Can you imagine that? After all he's been through, he comes in and he shows us his wounds. He lets us touch him. And he says, hey, you got anything to eat around here? Like I said, traveling with Jesus is strange things happen. But we couldn't believe it. But there he was. The man we saw crucified. He was dead. I'm telling you right now, he was dead. A soldier took a spear and jabbed it in his body to make sure that he was dead before they took him off the cross. There he is, standing right in front of us, alive. Peter's story and the others who followed Jesus. This is the story that they would have told to those who weren't there. But the interesting thing is that there were so many who were there. See, Jesus didn't rise from the dead in isolation. There were many witnesses to this event. There were also several unexpected encounters that took place on that day as well. Unexpected events, unexpected encounters. This day was full of the unexpected. Have you ever had an unexpected encounter with someone that had a profound change on your life? Now, we all meet people on a regular basis that we may not have been expecting to meet that day, but how often do these casual encounters drastically change our lives? But every now and then, we meet someone that does. Now, I could tell you of a time when I went bowling with my friends, and I went bowling with them on a regular basis, usually on Saturday nights, and you meet a lot of people at the bowling alley, but there was this one particular night that had a drastic change on my life. I got to the bowling alley late. I went out with my family to celebrate my parents' anniversary, so that's how I know what the date of this meeting was. And my friends had this girl with them, and it happened to be this lady right here. And I wasn't expecting to meet her, and it had a dramatic change on my life. And here I am years later, and it's like those kinds of things, not expecting to meet somebody, and you had this dramatic change. The women went to the tomb. They were going to anoint a body. And then they were just going to go about their day as they had previously planned. But when they got to the tomb was empty. There was no body there to anoint for burial. They didn't know what was going on. Then they have this unexpected encounter with these two guys who turn out to be angels. They tell them that Jesus is not in the tomb because he's not dead, he's alive. And the angels tell them also, remember how he used to tell you about what was going to happen. And it says the women remembered. They had to be reminded. Then we have these two guys walking to Emmaus. Now, this is a 7-mile walk from Jerusalem. So it was going to take them several hours to get there. But they have this unexpected encounter with a man who joins them as they walk. Now, I don't know how common this was, but I think if you're walking for several hours and there's a great amount of people who are leaving because the Passover is over at this point, and they say that Jerusalem would swell to 6 times its size, that there would be so many people visiting Jerusalem. So I believe that when you're leaving the city, it's probably, not unusual to encounter somebody walking along the road and, having a conversation with them. They have this unexpected encounter, and he comes up to him and he says to him, hey, what are you guys talking about? And they look at him and go like, what, are you new around here? Are you the only one in Jerusalem that doesn't know what's been happening? Because what happened to Jesus was the talk of Jerusalem. Because remember, he was a public figure. When he came in to Jerusalem, the crowds met him as he rode into town. And this was just a week ago. Oh, what a week it has been. So Jesus looks at them and says, as they say this to him, don't you know about what happened? And they say to Jesus, we thought he was the one. We thought he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. We thought that he was the one. We were the one we were putting our hopes and our dreams in this guy. But then our leaders, and they took him and they crucified him and he was dead. But there's something else going on. Our women went to the tomb this morning and they came back and they had this incredible story about how he's not in the tomb, and there's these angels there, and they're telling us that he's not dead, he's alive. But we know he's dead, we saw it. And Jesus looks at them. They don't recognize Jesus at this point. Jesus says to them that they're foolish and slow of heart to understand, and he proceeds to explain to them from the Scriptures all that had been written about him, about his suffering, about his death, and yes, even about his resurrection. These two men and all of Jesus' followers, as well as all the religious leaders, had all the information that they needed to figure this thing out. But none of them had the faith to put it all together. Because Jesus had been telling them himself what was going to happen when they got to Jerusalem. He was telling them throughout his ministry. There's at least 3 separate times that's recorded in the Gospels where Jesus tells them what's going to happen. But the problem is they only heard what they wanted to hear. They only wanted to hear that we're going to go to Jerusalem and we're going to take over. We're going to go to Jerusalem, Jesus is going to be king, and you know what? We're going to have some really great jobs. We're going to get to boss people around, we're going to be in charge. And the whole time Jesus is saying, well, wait a minute, it's really not going to be like that. And if you want to be a leader, you've got to be a servant. And they're going, yeah, sure, Jesus, whatever you say. They only heard what they wanted to hear. The 2 men on the road didn't recognize Jesus until after he opened the Scriptures to them. See, we learn the truth about Jesus when we open the Scriptures, when we have the desire to look into the Scriptures, to know who Jesus really is, Jesus provided his followers with all the information that they needed to know that he was the Messiah. We have all the information that we need to know that Jesus is the Messiah. The thing is that just as the followers on the day of his resurrection, we need the faith to go along with the knowledge. Because we can read the stories, we can go through the rituals, we can celebrate the holidays, but without faith, these things are completely meaningless. We won't recognize the Savior. We will have an intellectual understanding of things, but we would always be questioning whether or not it's true. It's faith, and it's faith alone that leads us to the Savior. It wasn't until Jesus broke the bread, he revealed to them through the Scriptures, and I can imagine because they said, were our hearts burning within us as he revealed the Scriptures to us? Could you imagine having this conversation with Jesus? And he's telling you, starting with Moses and going through the prophets and saying all the things that pertain to him, which would be everything, and just having your heart come alive inside you, and you're going, yeah, it's true. But you have this nagging doubt in the back of your mind because you know the guy was dead. And you know people usually stay that way. But as they were with him and they heard him talking and they're seeing this in the Scriptures, they invite him in because it's getting late in the day and he breaks the bread. And it's at that very moment that they remember. It's at that very moment when their faith comes into practice. It's at that very moment when they recognize him because they remembered what he said at that table. He broke the bread and said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." They didn't know what it meant at the time because they had selective hearing. They're sharing this meal, and it's like, okay, sure, broken body, whatever, okay, passing the bread around. But now it was all coming together. Now they had the faith to realize that what he was telling them all along. And the disciples who are back in Jerusalem, and they run back to tell them, and they're going, yes, we know he's alive. Now it's all coming together. Because remember when we were with him, and we were only like half listening to him because Jesus said some weird things, and we the stuff that we like, we'd say, yeah, let's hone in on that a little bit. But then the things that we didn't understand, the things that kind of like made us go like, what? The things that kind of made us think like, you know what, I don't understand that stuff. We kind of turned a deaf ear to that. Well, now I kind of understand what he was talking about. Because he can be alive. Because that's what he said. When we were walking on the road and he would pull us aside and say, listen guys, when we get there, it's going to be kind of a weird week. It's going to be a little different. Now you know what's going to happen when we get there. I've been telling you guys. When we get there, I'm going to be handed over. Okay? They're going to mistreat me. They're going to kill me. I'm going to die. But on the third day, I'm going to rise again. Jesus would pull them aside and tell them this. They never wanted to hear that. They would start having conversations about who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. And who, different things. They just didn't want to hear it. But now, all this is coming back to them. They're going, yes, yes. And their faith is taking over. And now they can see Jesus standing in the room with them. They can recognize who he is. They can touch him. They can see the wounds. They can know that it was him. because Jesus was resurrected in his crucified body. He exposed the wounds so there would be no mistaking that he was the one that they saw hanging on the cross. That there could be no mistake that he died and that he lived again. Today I can stand here and proclaim that Jesus is alive. I can show you where it says this in the Scriptures. But without faith, this doesn't mean anything. Do you want to have an unexpected encounter with Jesus? It all begins with faith. It all begins with looking at his words and his actions and everything he did through the eyes of faith. When Peter would explain this to people, he would probably have talked about that night when they were sitting around the table, when they were having the meal that we know as the Last Supper. And Peter probably would have talked about how Jesus washed their feet. And before Jesus' resurrection, Peter probably had a very different view of what was going on. He was uncomfortable with it. He didn't want Jesus to wash his feet. He didn't understand, and Jesus even had to say to him, "You guys don't understand now what's going on, but you will." Because Jesus knew that their faith was going to be tested. But he knew. He just kept talking to them. He kept explaining it to them. Because Jesus knew that we are all on a journey of faith. And we are all at different stages in this journey. But we can always have that encounter with Jesus. As they were sitting at that table, Peter probably would have told everybody about the things that took place. Of how Jesus would have took the bread. And even though he didn't understand it at the time, how Jesus would have taken that bread and broke it. And as he would say to them, "This is my body, which is broken for you." He said, each time that you eat of this bread, each time you eat of it, remember me. Remember what I have done for you. Peter probably would have also told them about what happened after the meal, when Jesus took the cup. And he said to them, "This is the cup of the new covenant in my blood." He says, "Remember this each time that you drink it." At this table, Jesus invited his friends and his followers. But Jesus also, along the way, invited all of those he came in contact with. So Jesus' table is open to all those who are seeking. All those who have a desire to know who Jesus is. All those who already consider themselves the friends and the followers of Jesus. This is Jesus' table. And Jesus opens this table up to all. So I invite you all to come and to come forward. and receive the broken body and the outpoured blood of Jesus this morning. We will be receiving communion in a manner which is called intinction, where we will take the bread and we will dip it into the cup. So come, for all things are ready.